everyone, and welcome to CEC online lecture. The topic of analysis that we will be looking forward in the study is world economy. We shall try to understand world economy from the view of how there are many institutions which are managing various aspects of the world economy, namely trade, finance, amongst others. We shall try to understand world economy from the point of the anchors, various anchors that are playing a very vital role in the management of various dimensions of world economy, as well as playing a key role in understanding and shaping the contours of world politics. Now, when we understand the idea of economy, we have to bring into focus that economic models are mainly focusing on mechanisms of production and distribution. We know that there are three key main economic models, namely capitalism, which gives emphasis on private ownership, profit, amongst others; socialism, which focuses on state ownership of means of production and distribution; and then mixed economy, which is largely a mixture of both of them. Now, when we try to understand world economy, the another important focus is on the anchors that are managing it. Now, when we look at the key anchors of world economy, the first that comes to our mind is World Trade Organization, the WTO. The WTO is the successor to GATT. GATT was a series of trade negotiation rounds from 1947 till 1994. There were several rounds that were conducted, and at the end of the 8th round, the Uruguay round, World Trade Organization was established. There are several differences between, therefore, that is of GATT and WTO. GATT was an ad hoc forum. WTO is now a permanent organization. GATT was mainly focusing on the trade negotiation rounds. WTO, on the other hand, is a permanent international organization. When we try to understand GATT and WTO, very important aspect is with reference to the domestic laws. Yes, GATT did not have any binding provisions for the nations to make changes in the domestic law. However, when one signs and ratifies WTO agreements, it is mandatory for the respective national and state government to make changes in their law of the land. So therefore, GATT was primarily weak in terms of implementation and dispute settlement. WTO, when we look at its functioning, is far more stronger than GATT in terms of implementation and dispute settlement. When we look at the key functions of WTO, they are primarily that it is a forum for settlement of trade disputes. It provides a platform for negotiation on various agreements of WTO. It provides technical assistance to various countries as and when called for. Now, when we look at the structure of WTO, from ministerial conference to general council to dispute settlement body, trade policy review body, councils on committees of goods, services, trips, all of it shows that how the mandate of global trade that WTO manages, how the focus of global trade that WTO looks into has indeed magnified over time. When we look at how GATT was primarily focusing on negotiation rounds, look at the history of GATT round, be it Geneva, Torquay, NSA, all of these rounds shows that over the time, the focus was just not on goods, but also with time, the focus magnified for including trade in services. And when we look at the structure of WTO agreements, it gives a clear idea that how global trade has indeed become a very complex and contested manner from the time of the end of the Second World War, when attempt was made to regulate global trade and its various aspects via GATT rounds, to present day time where trade is just not about trade in goods, but also focusing on services and new aspects like patents, trademark, copyright. WTO agreements, namely GATT, GATTs, TRIPS, all of it shows that how significant is WTO today in providing a platform for trade negotiations, how important WTO today is in presenting a forum for policy dialogue on various aspects of trade mechanisms. Now, alongside, one has to look into focus that the working of WTO has also been contested by various organizations and from various perspectives. Namely, we look at how WTO has been criticized for a democratic deficit in terms of its structure and working, namely how unelected powerful bureaucracies, they play an important role with respect to decision making ability of the state, and they have an impact on the state sovereignty also. Then another critique that has been labeled against the WTO, that it is Janu facet. One hand, it offers advantages, but one cannot ignore the disadvantages also that comes, that how the agenda of trade is tilted towards offering more benefits towards the rich countries, how the entire paradigm of patents, copyright, trademarks, they put developing countries at a disadvantage when it comes to vis-a-vis the developed world. Then another anchor of global economy are the Bretton Woods institutions. Now, before we understand them, let's understand the Bretton Woods Conference. After the Second World War, there was an attempt which was primarily known as the UN Conference on Finance and Monetary Aspects. Now, this conference held in New Hampshire, United States from July 1944 onwards for 22 days. It tried to focus to bring the focus of the world leaders towards management and regulation of global monetary and financial aspects. The outcome was that we can study today are the two Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank and the IMF. Now, both the World Bank and the IMF, they are Bretton Woods institutions. They are headquartered in Washington. They have annual meetings. They have huge budgets. Both of them set up joint task force providing assistance to countries whenever called for. However, there is a significant amount of difference in the work done by IMF and the World Bank. The IMF is the organization that looks into exchange rate stability. IMF looks into the aspect of financial management of the world economy, whereas the World Bank is primarily focused on financing of long-term developmental projects. The IMF draws its resources from via the mechanisms of the quota system, whereas the World Bank draws its resources by borrowing from the international bond market. So therefore, there are differences. That is, IMF is primarily focusing on the larger fiscal perspective, exchange rate stability, monetary stability, providing assistance, and above all, by looking into these dynamics, it is playing an important role in the management of global trade also. The World Bank, on the other hand, as we all know, the World Bank Group, via its various institutions, is looking into the development economic perspective for various nations. It looks into providing coordination whenever called for. It provides technical assistance and loans to organizations and nations in order to cater to their development agenda. Now, when we look at the World Bank, we have to understand that the World Bank comprises of the World Bank Group, namely International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, International Development Association, Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, International Financial Cooperation, and the International Center for Settling Down the Investment Disputes. Now, this shows us also that how today the mandate and the paradigm of what issues and various aspects that the World Bank looks into has indeed magnified and increased over time. This shows us that how the three key main anchors of world economy today, namely the WTO, the IMF, the World Bank, they are playing an important role in management of global trade and finance. Now, once we are looking as to how they are playing an important role in management of global trade and finance, we also now have to look at that how today world trade is much more than it was at the time of end of the Second World War. The end of Second World War was followed by the Cold War, which again was a war primarily looking at two broad economic models. One was the capitalist driven open economy model, other was the communist driven closed economy model. So therefore there was this entire debate, and the end of the Cold War with the dissolution of Soviet Union, disintegration of Soviet Union, the world witnessed a new paradigm where globalization, which though always existed, however, after the Cold War, the neoliberal driven globalization indeed witnessed new changes, and with this also there was profound changes on the world apparatus also, namely that there was rise of new centers of power, namely how world witnessed new issues to cater to. So therefore, with the rise of global markets, global finance, there were also issues, namely that is whether the agenda of management of global trade and finance, was it equally applicable and accessible for all, namely in terms of the gap between the rich north and the poor south. Then another focus that this entire paradigm of debate on global trade and finance brings into focus is how today countries are looking at the ambit of trade war. When we look from the contemporary global reality, today another extension and a new phase of warfare has been the trade war, wherein countries try to present harms and losses to each other from the point of view of tariffs, controlling their economies via protectionist measures, offering more to home industry rather than focusing on global integration. And amidst this scenario, the key anchors of the world economy, the WTO, IMF and the World Bank have an important role to play. Further, when we look at how today dimensions of economic development are not merely about economic gains, but also looking at from a holistic perspective of environmental sustainability, looking at from the point of view of health security. So therefore, in such a scenario, international organizations like the World Bank, which is also a United Nations specialized agency, has to look into this changing perspective and paradigm which is there in global affairs. Another key non-state actor in global economy, which is having a very huge impact in the regulation of world markets, are the multinational corporations and transnational cooperation. It is very essential to understand that how today MNCs and TNCs, be it Samsung, Toyota, GE, to name a few, are there today. Some of the MNCs and TNCs have their annual budgets equivalent to GDPs of several countries. Today, MNCs and TNCs, they offer huge amount of jobs and employment opportunities, and they are creating new dynamism for the management, for the regulation, for the movement of goods and services across the globe. Now, MNCs and TNCs, alongside offering huge benefits in world economy, from research and development, from huge amount of consumer choices opportunities, job opportunities, and most important, presenting new inputs from the FDI perspective. At the same time, today, there are also question marks that are raised on the mechanisms of work of MNCs and TNCs. To name a few, how today the working of MNCs have come into under scanner because of tax avoidance, because of corrupt practices, and because of ignorance of local needs, and also that whether they are attempting cultural homogenization. We have to understand that MNCs and TNCs are distinguished from each other primarily from their ownership patterns. That is, MNCs have centralized management systems, whereas TNCs are supposed to be having less centralized management system. And this is why TNCs are believed to be more connected to grassroots issues and realities because of absence of centralized management system, whereas MNCs are, because of centralized management system, policies and decision making, are somewhere rooted away from the grassroots realities. Host and home country debate is very essential to understand here. Home country where the headquarters are located, and host country where the other management units, subsidiaries and operating units are located. Now, it is often said that how today MNCs and TNCs have become new engine of capitalist exploitation, wherein the rich countries suffer progress, whereas the poor countries suffer because of exploitation, namely use of availability of cheap raw material, labor in the developing countries for the benefit of the advanced countries. So therefore, this entire debate, that is, quite often MNCs and TNCs are found to be indulging and engaging in the aspects of lower wages to secure higher profits. Nonetheless, today MNCs and TNCs have become an important engine to carry forward the economic globalization. Today, they often cast a doubt on the ability of the state to form their own laws from the sovereignty perspective, because there are several news as to how today MNCs and TNCs have an important stake and say in the decision making ability and have become an important stakeholder as well in the public policy making of several states and governments. Another aspect of global economy that we need to understand, that today global economy is witnessing new coalitions, and these coalitions, though they have existed since long, nonetheless today they are presenting new focus on new issues that are emerging in various aspects of the world affairs. We all know that today the idea of G7 has expanded to G20, and today nations, when they are getting together, alongside issue of economics, trade, finance, they are also bringing into focus that how the idea of security today has expanded towards inclusion of new security perspectives. Then at the same time, today when we look at G77, how at the United Nations, this is a coalition, this is an intergovernmental board focus in order to bring the focus of the issues towards what the perspective of developing countries is. It is there, and today how G77 is playing an important role as an intergovernmental voting bloc in important organizations like the United Nations. Then at the same time, we also have to recall that how today United Nations Conference on Trade and Development puts forward the idea to secure justice in trade matters, the idea to end monopoly supremacy of the rich over the poor, and above all bringing into focus the huge gap that exists between the north versus the south. Another important aspect while we are understanding the alternate perspectives in world economy is that of new international economic order. The idea of new, though it always, for example, from the Havana Conference in 1948 to non-alignment summit in 1973, it did always put forward the need for a more just, equitable trading system, terms of agreement and arrangement which always favor the developing world. And then and how in 1974 this view was officially endorsed also by the UN General Assembly resolution. So this shows that how world economy today is much more diversified. There are various stakeholders. The issues that world economy has to look into, they're also increasing day by day, and these issues also have a bearing on what lies ahead for the future of world global anchors, IMF, WTO, MNCs, 3NCs, World Bank, and also for the future of globalization. Because with rampant changes, with disruption becoming as a way of norm today, globalization is under scanner, and so are these key anchors of world economy. We hope you all enjoyed learning this more with us in this lecture. In order to dwell further into key anchors of world economy, I request you all to definitely browse through the contemporary developments and issues which the key anchors of world economy are doing from their web resources, imf.org, wto.org, worldbank.org. Look at these key resources for further elaboration and understanding of what are the important developments that are taking place in the world economy. Most important, it is essential to understand that world economy in terms of world trade, in terms of movement of world finance, has witnessed changes. Today, there are much more things at stake than it was at the time. The kind of economy that we had at the end of the Second World War, the kind of economy the world had at the end of the Cold War. Today, trade has expanded. We just don't focus on trade on goods, but also focus on trade in services. We just don't focus on movement of money, but today electronic finance, global markets, cyber security, all of it are essential components to understand global world economy. Similarly, at the other hand, today economy and health are also crucially related, because unless and until people are healthy, they come out and work, the idea of global economy would be only one-sided. So therefore, how the idea of security has magnified, this definitely has an impact on the main ideas that are there within the ambit of world economy.